Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is In Our Skin, and this week we are talking about our bodies. Tough subject for many, but we're talking about why it is that it is such a tough thing for us. That relationship with our bodies. Why is it that our bodies challenge us? Why do we so often blame our bodies for our struggles? If you don't understand what I mean by this, I think you soon will. I think it's something that once we dig into it, almost every one of us can relate to on some level. In the world of therapy, we talk about body dissatisfaction and body image. You might have your own ways of conceptualizing what this relationship is like for you. How do you feel in your body? How do you feel in your skin? You may have heard me share before that one of the things that I often ask people when I start doing this piece of work with them is this. Do you remember when you became aware of your body? I did have one person answer this in this most beautifully positive way, telling me a story about playing a sport and how she felt so good and embodied while she was doing it. And for every other person, literally every other woman I have spoken to and asked this question in the past 17 years, has answered with a painful moment where they became aware of their body in the way that they suddenly felt that their body was not right, it wasn't okay, that there was something wrong with it, where they became aware of their body because someone was drawing attention to it in a way that made them feel uncomfortable or badly about themselves. And the common denominator in these stories is that degree of separation. Either we feel like we're on the outside looking in, or we want to get out of our skin and detach. And often what happens is that there's a shift that occurs and we don't really get back in those bodies in the same way thereafter. And these don't have to be big traumas. They can be just painful moments. Moments where we start to look at ourselves differently. Moments where we start to feel differently about ourselves. Moments when we start to self-question. And in all of these moments, the thing that's occurring is that our body is becoming something that we start to refer to in just that way. My body. It's no longer me. I am not it. It is something that is problematic, and it is something that I have a degree of separation from. Often, it is something that, if not in this moment, soon thereafter, becomes a thing that we believe that we have to control, a problem that we have to solve. And what I'm going to talk to you about today will hopefully help you make sense of why it is we do that. Because I think a lot of us are going to relate to this. And if this isn't for you, that's okay. But maybe there's someone you want to share it with instead. Because we are doing this as a function of coping. Sometimes it's actually really comforting to feel like there's something we can control. Sometimes we need something to focus on to make sense of the things that don't otherwise make sense. Because it's really uncomfortable when we don't feel like we have any power or control. And sometimes that separation that we feel from our body gives us a little bit of space and distance from the things that are hard. And here's how that works. If the problem is my body, then it might not feel like the problem is me, who I am inherently and innately as this human being. It gives us something that feels more external and a little less internal. Does that make sense? As backwards as it may seem to feel like we can blame our body and not blame ourselves entirely, it can give us a little bit of mental emotional space from the pain and distress that we're experiencing in those difficult moments that come up for us. And now circle back to feeling like we want something that we can control and something we can do about it. Well, if our body is the problem, then we just have to fix that. And it's also not a coincidence that I'm following up the last 2 episodes talking about this subject, because one of the main roots of this problem comes from those outdated cultural values that so many of us have adopted, absorbed, or internalized, whether or not we meant to. That for most women, there is still an ongoing belief that our value lies in what our bodies look like. And this happens for very good reason. Because this is still perpetuated. It is still reinforced We have to decide if we're going to go against the grain or if we're going to continue to give this power over us. And it's not an easy choice. So, buckle up. Today, we're talking about women, body dissatisfaction, and how we can begin to turn the tide on the way that we feel in our skin. I'm Ashley McCann, and I've spent my whole career looking at subjects like these. I created this podcast to bring the conversations that so often happen behind closed doors out into the light so that we can all learn and grow through these challenges together, so that you know you're not alone. Have you ever noticed this about yourself or seen it in the women you love? That we poke and prod our bodies. That when something goes wrong, when a relationship ends or we don't feel accepted by someone, that one of our first responses is often to look at what we look like, to try to find what is wrong with us. And here's the unfortunate thing, friends. When we look for what is wrong with us, we will always find something. It's not something that anyone else would see as problematic, but we all have these things. If you think of the person who you think of as the epitome of perfection, that person will have something in her mind that is the problem with her body, with the way she looks. No one is actually immune. But don't we imagine that there is immunity in a certain size or shape, that at a certain weight we'd be free of all of our problems, that we would be loved and accepted, that we would be successful and seen and heard, or whatever that thing is for you that you think that having the perfect body would bring you? And maybe it has nothing to do with anyone or anything outside of you, but maybe it just feels like you could finally feel okay in your skin. If you're someone who feels beyond this or doesn't relate, that's definitely the goal. To get to a place where there's more neutrality, where our bodies aren't the punching bags for these things, that we don't have to put so much pressure on the value and importance of the external if we don't find it to be the most valuable and important thing about us. And the unfortunate reality is that this is still a challenge for most women. So we're going to take a deeper look at it today so that hopefully we come out on the other side a little more awake, a little more aware, and a little better equipped to be able to start to address this for ourselves, and so that we can support the others in our life in doing the same. Because the reality is that we might be killing it in our work. We might be an amazing friend, partner, parent. We might be creative and brilliant. And we might be missing out on the opportunity to really enjoy and savor those things that are amazing about us because we're looking at the one thing that we think isn't amazing. And this body stuff goes where we go. I'll tell you, it's an all too common thing to be on a call with one of my female clients and have them so frustrated that they still care so much, that when they're going to give a presentation or when they're showing up at a school event, that they feel like they can't go to their gym or to the class they want to go to because their body doesn't look right enough yet, which is, as we all know, quite a paradox. And these women hate that they still care what they look like, even though they don't want to. They hate that they feel limited by all of those thoughts in their head about what they should do or not do, what they should wear or not wear, what they should look like or not look like. Do you relate to that? We have all likely either been or been surrounded by the women who are setting goals for their weight like it is the holy grail. In New Year's resolutions and preparation for vacations, and oh my goodness, forget it when it comes to weddings and reunions. Weight and size and shrinking ourselves taking so much time and energy. And what is it that we're really trying to get at? For some, it's just wanting to be able to feel comfortable enough to not be thinking about what they look like. For others, it's about feeling like if they don't look a certain way, they are not going to be seen as good enough, successful enough, valuable enough, or worthy. There is a wide spectrum and a million reasons that these things take on meaning and power. And honestly, I will tell you that they're good reasons. No one is out there squandering their time and energy on these things for a stupid reason, though I can see that it would be easy to look at this and to think of it that way. It's easy to judge ourselves and others for caring, for dieting, for doing all of these things. And I know that some of you out there aren't judging this because you are fully, deeply entrenched in it, and you don't see another possibility. You don't see how you could possibly not care. That makes sense too. Again, this is something that we have been told our whole lives is one of the most valuable things about us as women. Whether that was said explicitly or we inferred it implicitly, the messages have been there. To perhaps drive this home, I want you all to know that we start having an understanding of gender roles by age 4, and by age 7, our attitudes and beliefs about gender are fully formed. So these aren't decisions that we're making as wise adults. These are thoughts and beliefs and attitudes that we are internalizing at an extremely young age before we really have time to think about or discern or decide if we want to take something on or not. We are adopting, like the little sponges we are, whatever it is we're exposed to, whatever it is that we are told is the way. And I do say this in this way intentionally because we do, at that age and stage of our development, adopt beliefs very concretely without a lot of discernment. We don't really start discerning and saying, is that true or untrue? Is that for me or not for me? Until we get to about age 9. And so at those young ages, we are truly very sponge-like. If someone says girls do this and they don't do this, we are highly likely to take that on unless someone else is present who says that's not true or correct. So if we didn't have people around us giving us more options and a wider spectrum for what being a female is, we absorbed whatever was shown. So whatever was modeled, whatever was described, and whatever beliefs and attitudes were shared with us. And I think it will make a lot of sense to consider the fact that when we adopt beliefs at that young of an age, at that early stage in our life, we might not be especially cognizant or thinking about those beliefs. They're just kind of there in the background of our mind. And because they've been there since such a young age, they've had a lot of opportunity to grow and form. And because these beliefs have been in those neural pathways of our brain for all of the years of our lives, they've basically had unlimited opportunity to gain traction, to be reinforced. But if you haven't recently listened to my episode on beliefs, you might not be remembering something about them. That when we hold a belief, we are more likely to find evidence of that belief than not. We are more likely to organize our experiences and file things away by the beliefs that we have. You can imagine it like we have these filing boxes in our minds. The ones that we have boxes for with labels are more likely to be the places in which we put our experiences. So here's an example of this. Imagine that there's a file box in your mind labeled How a Girl Should Be. And within that file box are all of the things that you have learned and gathered over time for how a girl should be. In that box, there might be a folder labeled Kind, another labeled Caregiver. There might be one that's got the label Helper. There might be another for Selfless. Perhaps there's another for Delicate, Demure, or Pretty. And this one has a subfolder for Must Care About Your Appearance and Dress to Appeal to Males. And another for Small, or Quiet, or Well-Behaved, and that ever subversive belief that we should be obedient. And perhaps some folders that are labeled with don'ts, the things that girls are not to be or do. Maybe these have to do with sports or the types of jobs you're allowed to engage in or that you should be interested in. And maybe there's some folders with labels about what you do around the house. Now, all of these files are just neural pathways in our brain. These are just things that are quiet in the background of our mind that we organize and store, learning and experiences that we've had, and they help us understand and categorize the new experiences that we run into. So let's imagine that this is a female who had all of these files start to form and develop and get organized in her mind over time by, say, age 9, and now she's 14. She's going into high school, and she discovers all of the options for the team sports, and the one that calls her most is football. She played intramural when she was younger, and she gets so excited to try out When she steps onto the field, she's the only girl. And she hears someone make a snarky comment about her being there. And someone else laughs at that comment, and something starts to go off inside of her. A discomfort, a questioning. Are they right? Should I be here? Do I belong? And you can imagine that in the background of this experience, her brain is sorting through all of the options that it has to understand this experience. And what it might come upon are some of these files for the things that girls do and don't do, and the ways that girls are, and the ways that girls should be. Well, maybe girls shouldn't be tough, and maybe they shouldn't be playing that sport, and maybe they should be interested in other things. And maybe she keeps going, and maybe she doesn't. But then she might walk into another class later that year, and it's culinary. And here her partner's a boy who defaults to her and expects her to be good at everything, though she's never done it before. And it starts to wake up something within her. Something that maybe had been there, again, in the background of her mind from when she was young. From when she used to play house and she got that kitchen set as a toy. And she starts to think, well, maybe I should be good at this. And she starts to put in more effort than that boy without him even asking anymore. And partway through class, when they're baking cookies and sampling everything they've made, someone makes a comment about how she seems to be eating too many cookies and she should drop some pounds. And that filing system in her mind finds that file for what she's supposed to look like. And it gets in. And she stops eating cookies. And she doesn't eat them for the rest of the year. And a few years later, when she walks into her economics class after her last test and sees that she's gotten a C, she starts to question everything about herself. Not just her ability in that class, but her intelligence as a whole and whether or not she should be there at all. And she just starts to feel like something is wrong with her, like she's not good enough. And without even noticing the relationship between the 2 points, she starts changing the way she eats, eating better, healthier, cleaner, more intelligently. When she gets another C on a homework assignment, she decides not only to drop the class, but to leave her major as a whole. And a guy who gets the same grade will still believe that it's for him and he'll stay. And the research supports that. These challenges that are brought on by gender norms are still something we have to contend with. And they have a major impact on our relationships with our bodies. While you may have only related to some or part of what I have said so far today, what I want you to understand is that this actually is extremely pervasive amongst women. With 65 to 89% of women experiencing body dissatisfaction, to the extent that there is actually a term given to this called normative discontent. Because it is so normal for women to not be content with their bodies that they can use that term in this description, basically just assuming that most women have this experience. So many women spend their lives beating up their bodies, mentally, physically, trying to make them right, or hating them because they don't believe they are. And we simply do this because we want to feel all right. The belief that if we get our bodies right, that we'll then be okay, is something that is so pervasive. I see it every day. We believe that when we finally feel good enough in our bodies, we will also feel good enough in our lives. We might be looking to feel safe enough or valuable enough. We want to feel like we can exhale and enjoy the ride, and we tend to put this marker somewhere in the future where we believe that we will finally get there. That when we get our bodies just right, we will finally be able to do just that, to just be. And until we get there, our body is public enemy number 1, persona non grata, the threat to our successful existence. And we're pretty set up for all of this. Not to be a negativo, but our chances as females of developing body image issues, of feeling that discontent, discomfort, or disdain for our bodies is way higher than it is for hetero males, and it starts when girls are extremely young. The more a girl subscribes to gender norms or is told that she should, whether directly or indirectly, the more body dissatisfaction she's likely to experience. Those preconceptions of how a girl should be that seem to outline the right way to show up in the world lead girls and women to feel like they are doing it wrong. The more we believe them, the less happy we are with our bodies. And as most of us know, we then think about our bodies even more. We think about how we look all the time. This stays very front of mind. And this circles us right back around to explaining why it is that so many of us are setting these body goals every year for every event and every trip and all of the things, because it's not really about those things. It's about wanting to feel good. And we just feel like we've been given this information that if our bodies are right, we can finally feel that. The unfortunate reality is that the more we subscribe to these gender role stereotypes, the more we believe in the feminine versus the masculine and these polar ends of a spectrum, the more likely we are to not only have body image issues and mental health challenges, but to be suicidal. We see correlations between these things in the research. It is very real. That drive that it creates within us to be perfect, to be thin, to be attractive, to be whatever it is that might have gotten in for you and for me, it puts us on a hamster wheel where we go around and around just feeling like we haven't met that standard yet. And we'll believe we haven't met that standard even if anyone from the outside might look in and see it. Because in reality, what is often happening is that something else in our life isn't right. So we believe that we aren't right enough in the way that we look in our body, in the way that we're presenting, in the way that we are being a female. And the thing that might not be going right might be our relationship, whether with a partner or with a friend or with our boss. We will look at what we believe we are doing wrong without even recognizing that we're doing it. We will start to assess ourselves on a very subconscious level, and we will find the problem. And if we are in a place where we have believed that our body isn't right or some other female ideal hasn't been met perfectly, we are highly likely, whether we recognize it or not, start to focus on that thing instead. Again, this can be a self-protective pattern where we're directing our attention at something that is in our power and control. Because as we all know, we can't control other people, how they see us, what they think of us, whether they like us or not. But we can control what we eat or how much we exercise or what we wear. It's not uncommon or unheard of for us to project our hard feelings and our hard experiences onto our body, like our body is this separate container, or that our body is to blame. Because at least if it's our body, it's not who we really are. It's not us. To some small part of us, that might make it feel a little more tolerable and a little more okay. It's not uncommon when a woman is experiencing something hard in her life for her to also be feeling badly about her body, the two often being tied together in a way that's not always easily explicable. But to me, it makes so much sense, because the other thing about our bodies is that that's where we feel all of our feelings. And when we don't want to feel any hard feelings, because who really does, we might have a really hard time being in our bodies and feeling those feelings. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that when we experience trauma, we re-experience it in our bodies until it is healed, until we find that place of relief. And that is really, truly, validly hard, painful, challenging. So it makes a lot of sense if someone who is re-experiencing something difficult wants to disconnect from their bodies. There is no judgment in it. But the thing is, when we disconnect, when we separate from our body, and when we blame our body, which happens very frequently in these situations, we never find relief. We simply live in that loop. Whenever we experience the discomfort, we experience the hatred of our body, which is self-hatred. And that's no way to live. We wouldn't wish it upon a friend or an enemy. And in all of these situations, that level of disconnect from our body is our way of coping, which, again, it makes a lot of sense. The problem being, though, that once we get on this merry-go-round of coping, we inevitably become the victim of ourselves. Our own thoughts and behaviors turn on ourselves when we turn on our body. And in the end, our self-esteem suffers, and we feel more and more badly about ourselves and our bodies. We're talking about this because there is a way to change it. But I have to tell you, it is not by changing our bodies. I know there are a lot of us out there who are still probably thinking, feeling, wholeheartedly believing that that is the only way, and it's not. And honestly, a lot of you have probably had experiences that have shown you glimmers of this. Have you ever lost the amount of weight that you thought you wanted to lose, only to feel like you should lose some more? Have you ever gotten to some goal if you set a size or some change that you thought was going to be the end point, only to find another problem? Most people are going to answer yes to this. This is often how disordered eating becomes an eating disorder. People often initially set out to make some sort of change that they think is reasonable, only to get to a point where it feels like it's not enough, and so they do more. And then they do more, and then they do more, because the expectation just keeps changing. The bar keeps going higher or lower. So if you haven't experienced this, I'll just save you the time and energy and let you know that it doesn't last. It tends to be short-lived. And if you'll remember from earlier episodes, the explanation I gave for why I really think you should not try a diet, it's that dieting, restricting, tend to lead not just to regaining the weight, but to actually gaining back 25% more. If weight loss was the answer, then we would already have the solution to these problems. We wouldn't see numbers like 60 to 84% of women still walking around with body dissatisfaction. And I get it, for the people who feel like they're always failing at weight loss, remember, that's not you. That's because dieting and restriction don't actually work. They work against you. Those are the things that pull us into those mental, physical, and emotional patterns that lead to that boomerang effect, and people tend to eat more because of them, not less. So I'll link some of those earlier episodes in the show notes so that you can find them easily if you're curious about what it is I'm talking about here. The way that we actually get to change isn't by changing our bodies. It's by changing the beliefs that are fueling the focus on our body. And we start to change all of the patterns that are related to them. We don't go in the opposite direction toward not caring at all about our bodies, our health, ourselves. Instead, we actually start to heal our relationship with our body. We start to feel like we can be in our body and acknowledge our body more neutrally. We can feel, without feeling uncomfortable, what people talk about when they're describing embodiment. Can actually be in right relationship with your body so that there is that connection that was likely severed somewhere along the line. And so that the choices that you make aren't to beat your body up or to restrict it. They're to take care of your body so that you can take care of yourself. It's truly possible. And we can get to a point where we don't have to be fighting it and we don't have to be working so hard, and where we can naturally do the things that are aligned with who we really are and who we want to be, free of all of it, and it won't feel the same. I don't know if it sounds like I'm spewing rainbows and sunshine at you all. It's not always easy, but it is possible. It truly is. Because whether those patterns, those neural pathways in our brain, those file folders that we're looking to change up come from acculturation or tough experiences, traumas, or the like, we can get to a place where we aren't ruled by them anymore. We can change the stories and quiet the voices in our heads. Those voices of our parents or our shitty ex-boyfriends or girlfriends, or that voice from our past, that part of us that is so afraid. It's afraid that we'll be judged or not accepted, or that something will go wrong if we stop efforting to make our bodies perfect. We can get to a place where that part of us feels some peace again, where it doesn't have to work so hard, and we can let go of that self-questioning and the anxiety that comes with it. There are amazing therapies out there like EMDR that are made for this, that are made to address all of those file folders in our minds to help us begin to sort through and figure out what is ours and we want to keep, and what we picked up that no longer works for us, so that we can let it go. We can begin to do this work one file at a time, and we can get back to ourselves and back in our bodies so that we can begin to decide who it is that we really are and how we want to live our lives as we move forward. We can begin to make this change for ourselves, and when we do, we are part of a cultural shift that begins to allow others to break out of these polarities to be themselves as well. I'm so grateful that you listened along today, and I hope that you found this helpful. If you're looking for some support in how to get started, you can go right to the show notes and reach out to me. There are therapists all over the world that do this work, and you can always join me for an immersive weekend to begin some of this work for yourself. And if you're looking for some great community and resourcing along the way, you can join us for the Yoga of Life teacher training that begins this February. There, you will be surrounded by people and practices that will carry you through this work. This has been In Our Skin. Be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share with someone who will benefit from this. It keeps this free resource going. Thanks so much for joining along. And until next time, take care.